All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today we are going to be continuing the new feats that were introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And because we didn't quite get to the number of feats I wanted to last episode, I'm going to see if we can't get to a few more this time. So we're going to dive into it right now, starting with Eldritch Adept. Now, this is one of the first feats that just kind of rubs me the wrong way. There's another one we may get to in this video that has a similar effect on me, simply because this is a feat that takes a core aspect of a defining feature of another of one of the classes, and makes it so that anyone can have it, which I think kind of goes against the overall class design of 5th edition D&D. To kind of give you guys a refresher, this is the same thing I say every time I go over a subclass. 5th edition was designed so that every single class played very, very differently right from the beginning. So it would have these things included in each class that we call defining features. And these defining features would need to show up within the first two levels. Because the class, again, right from level 1 and level 2, the class should feel different. You know, a paladin should feel different than a ranger, despite the fact that they are both half-caster weapon-based classes. They're very, very different classes. And so what Eldritch Adept does is... you learn one Eldritch invocation option of your choice from the Warlock class. If the invocation has a prerequisite of any kind, you can choose that invocation only if you're a Warlock who meets the prereq. And then whenever you gain a level, you can replace the invocation with another one from the Warlock class. So basically, this gives any class that's willing to sacrifice a feat access to the defining feature of the Warlock class, which is their Eldritch invocations. Now, that's not the only defining feature of the Warlock, but it is a big part of it. Eldritch invocations basically permanently alter how certain spells or abilities work. So, for example, something like Fiendish Vigor is one you can actually take right at level 2 when you get access to them, and it lets you cast False Life on yourself at will as a first level spell without expending any spell slot or material components. It's a really, really common thing for Eldritch invocations to basically give you access to a spell, generally like first or second level spell. You will get access to use it at will, because again, Warlocks don't have a lot of spell slots. At max level, they have a grand total of 4. So, giving them access to low-level spells that other classes can use their low-level spell slots to cast makes sense. And it makes them unique and interesting to play. It makes them play very different from Warlocks and Sorcerers and Bards and Druids and Clerics. All the other caster, full caster classes play very, very, very differently than the Warlock. With Eldritch Adept, it takes some of that uniqueness away because it gives every class the ability to get at least one Eldritch invocation without having to multi-class to second level, because this isn't even a first level ability. This is a second level. Now, I do like the fact that if there's any prereqs to the spell, you can't take it unless you're a warlock. So Eldritch Adept can actually be used by warlocks to get an additional invocation, which I think is interesting. But if you're not a warlock, you are basically limited just to the Eldritch invocations a normal warlock could get at second level, and even those are limited even more. Things like the invocations that modify Eldritch Blast, which are really, really useful. You can't take any of those because they have the prerequisite. They require Eldritch Blast. Any of the invocations that require you to have a certain pact blessing, you can't take any of those. Any of the ones that you have to be a certain level, you can't take. So that for me is the one kind of redeeming feature of this feat, is it is a significantly limited version of what warlocks get. So if you do want the full invocation experience, you have to actually be a warlock, where this just gives you a little taste. And it does kind of make sense from the idea that feats like this are basically an attempt to do a soft multi-class. And what I mean by that is multi-classing in 5th edition is remarkably simple to do. When you level up, you just choose to take a level in a different class, and the only real complicated part is figuring out, do you have the prereqs to multi-class into that class. Other than that, you're set. And if you are multi-classing, more likely than not, you are going to be multi-classing into a class that helps your current class. So generally, the prereqs aren't really that big an issue. Things like Warlock multiclassing into Bard or something like that. They're both charisma-based spellcasters. You don't really need to worry about anything. So with this, though, it lets you kind of multiclass. Like if you wanted to be maybe you wanted to be kind of like a Hexblade, which they have a Hexblade patron now. But if you wanted to be more, a little bit more like an earlier version, where it was mostly like someone who's very skilled in swordplay, but just has this slight kind of tint, this just very slight bit of warlock in them. Maybe it was they had an interaction with a powerful entity just once, and instead of signing a whole pact, they just made like a verbal, listen, you give me this, and maybe I'll do something for you once. It kind of lets you flavor warlock aspects into any class without having to do a full multi-class. So I can understand that aspect of it. However, I'm still less than sold on the idea of let's give away versions of the defining features to any class, as long as they're willing to do a feat. The other issue that these feats pose is if you are using the customized lineage, or you're using the variant human, you get a feat at level 1. So theoretically, a human wizard with Eldritch Adept would actually have more warlock abilities at level 1 than an actual warlock. So, I'm not particular fond of it. There is a prereq that you have to have either spellcasting or the pact magic feature in order to be able to do this. So like a fighter couldn't take Eldritch Adept unless they already had something else that gave them either spellcasting or pact magic feature. So yeah, it's a little bit limited, but I'm still I'm not completely sold on it. I don't think it shouldn't exist, but I would probably require a pretty big story reason to allow a player to use this in one of my Giga campaigns. All right, so that was quick and simple. Let's go to the next one. Fey Touched. And this, there's another one I think called Shadow Touched, and they're both kind of two sides of this same coin. Both of them are kind of interesting. This one, your exposure to Feywild magic has changed you, granting you the following benefits. You increase intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1. So this is another one of those ones where if you have an odd numbered ability score, either from rolling or from something else, you can use this to get it even, which is the next bump up to your modifier, and get a little bit extra. So I always like those. In addition, you learn the Misty Step spell and one first level spell of your choice. First level spell must be from the Divination or Enchantment School of Magic. You can cast each of these spells without expending a spell slot. Once you cast either of these spells in this way, you can't cast that spell in this way again until you finish a long rest. You can also cast these spells using spell slots if you have one of the appropriate level, and the spellcasting ability is the one that's increased by this feat. So there's a lot to unpack here. For me, this, like Fey Touched and Shadow Touched, almost feels like adding a sub-race. Simply because they both kind of really heavily fit with the idea of like Eladrin, and pick a race that's born in the Shadow Fell, where it makes a little bit more sense with Eladrin, because Eladrin come with the innate ability to cast Misty Step once per day for free, and so this basically kind of gives you that, plus you get one other first level spell from any spell list. The only limitation is it has to be either divination or enchantment, which fits with the idea of the Feywild and it being infused with magic and it being a very kind of enchantment divination style place. From a kind of tactical aspect, first things first, Misty Step is just always a useful spell. Any sort of teleportation spells are always useful. With the other kind of first level divination or enchantment spells, there are lots of them. If I was a really smart person, I probably would have brought up both the divination and enchantment spell lists, but I'm certainly not that smart. So things like Charm Person, Command is another one that's really useful. Hex is another one that's massively useful. Hex is effectively a kind of different flavored version of a Hunter's Mark. And can be incredibly useful. So yeah, there's a fair amount of enchantment first level spells that are super useful. As far as divination spells, things like detect magic is massively useful. Hunter's Mark is a divination spell, so this would be one of the only ways you can actually get Hunter's Mark as a non ranger, because it doesn't show up on anyone else's spell list other than the Retribution Paladin, I think it is. Vengeance Paladin, sorry. The Vengeance Paladin gets it. But other than that, it is an exclusively Hunter spell, because, again, it's supposed to be a defining aspect of the Ranger. So yeah, there's a lot of different things you can do with divination and divination and enchantment spells, even just for the first level ones. So yeah, overall, I love Fey Touched. It is very much an interesting thing. The lore behind it is really cool, and there's just a lot of choices you can make. So. Next one is Fighting in an Initiate. This one does have a prereq. You have to have proficiency with a martial weapon, which does mean a lot of spellcasting classes that don't get proficiency with martial weapons won't be able to take this, but there are feats you can take that will give you proficiency in any weapons. You just choose a martial weapon and you're fine. But effectively, for fighting initiate, you learn one fighting style option of your choice from the fighter class. If you already have a style, the one you choose must be different. And whenever you reach a level that grants the ability score improvement feature, you can replace this feat's fighting style with another one from the fighter class that you don't have. I really enjoyed the new fighting styles that were introduced into Tasha's. You guys saw, I did a video on it. They were super duper cool. So, giving more classes access to these, I'm actually a fan of, especially since fighting styles are not a defining feature of any class. So this is just another way that you can kind of customize the character that you will want to play. For example, I have a Vengeance Paladin that dual wields longswords. In the play test, if I remember correctly, one of the fighting styles Paladins got access to was dual wielding, which basically lets you add your ability score modifier to the damage of your offhand attacks, which you can't do any other way. But when it went to the full book, they took that away. And so my Paladin had to use the defensive fighting style, simply because since he wasn't using a shield, he would need the extra armor. But I always didn't like that because it kind of emphasizes away from the idea of having a dual-wielding Paladin, and I think they're really interesting and they can be really cool to play. If you want to play, especially for like a Vengeance Paladin or some of the other subclasses that are a little bit more offense-oriented, you can have a really cool, fun time playing that Paladin. So with Fighting Initiate, you can get that. It costs you a single feat, which is not that bad. Definitely worth it. And then you get cool, awesome other stuff you can do. And especially, again, in my Paladin situation, dual wielding has another benefit, which is because you get extra attacks, you have extra chances to smite. I think I've told this as a story before, but one of my best times playing that Paladin was the Dungeon Master was having a bit of a power trip, to be blunt. And he had this guy that we were supposed to fight in like 3 or 4 levels. Like we were super under-leveled to be able to fight this guy. But you meet him early on, and then he becomes someone that you eventually get to kill. And so the bad guy was just, pissing me off and kept attacking me, and he actually punched me. And I'm like, I tried to talk my way out of it, and I finally went, well, that's it. I'm a Vengeance Paladin. I draw both my swords, and I had to attack him. And the Dungeon Master just looks at me. He's like, okay, and he's going to kill me with his really powerful boss. I did like 100 or 120 damage in, I think it was 2 attacks. It was either 2 or 3 attacks. Yeah, because I smited twice, and then one of my other allies just finished him up because he only had like a dozen hit points left, and so we killed this guy that was supposed to be a boss later on in the hardcover, and we killed him before he could do any of the things that make us want to kill him later, and it pissed off the Dungeon Master really bad. But I had fun. So yes, back to Fighting Initiate. I like it. I think it's cool. I think it can help you customize and make really interesting characters. And then the next one is Gunner. And this one is extremely limited in its scope, but in situations where it's necessary, it is essential. Basically, you can increase your dex score by 1 to a maximum of to 20. So another one where you can get extra stuff by increasing your dex. You gain proficiency with firearms. So this does require firearms to exist in the campaign setting. In addition, you ignore the loading property of firearms, and being within 5 feet of a hostile creature doesn't impose disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls. This is effectively crossbow expertise for firearms without the additional hand crossbow shot. Like it's almost the identical feat. They just get rid of that additional attack because firearms get very, very overpowered very quickly. And again, if your campaign setting doesn't have firearms, this is a completely wasted feat. There's nothing you can do. However, if your campaign does have firearms, other than artificers, there are no classes that get proficiency in firearms anywhere in 5th edition. You would have to custom rule it in for them to do it, or use something like Matt Mercer's Gunslinger subclass for the fighter in order to have anyone that can use a firearm. So this, again, if firearms do exist, this is an essential feat, because it can give any class the ability to use a firearm instead of only artificers and gunslinger fighters. So, yeah, don't have anything wrong with it. I don't think it's bad that it's extremely limited, because in the situations where it's going to be useful, it's going to be essential. So, easy as that. Also, being able to fire your gun without getting disadvantage when people are really close means you don't have to pull, well, I've got a sword and a gun, and if someone gets close, I stab them, and if someone's far away, I shoot them. No, you can just go at point blank, so. And I always like that. Next, we have the other feat that I have issues with, and this one I have even more issues. The feat is Metamagic Adept. And if you guess that this is giving the sorcerer defining feature to anyone, you're right. It does have prereq. You have to have spellcasting or pack magic, so this is something you have to be able to cast spells before you get it. However, you learn 2 metamagic options of your choice from the sorcerer class. You can use only one metamagic option on a spell when you cast it, unless the option says otherwise. Whenever you reach a level that grants the ability score improvement feature, you can replace one with another one, and you gain 2 sorcery points to spend on metamagic. They are added to any sorcery points you have for another source, but can only be used on metamagic, and you regain all spent sorcery points when you finish a long rest. So, this is even more open-ended than Eldritch Adept, where there is no limitation to what metamagic options you can choose. You literally have access to the entirety of the metamagic options that a sorcerer has, which they don't get until 3rd level. So theoretically, by our definition, metamagic isn't even a defining feature. Sorcery points are the defining feature, and metamagic modifies the defining feature. But they're an intrinsic part of being a sorcerer. And this gives sorcerer options to anyone that has the ability to cast spells. So again, a 1st level human variant wizard can actually have more sorcerer abilities than a 1st level dragonborn sorcerer, and will have more sorcerer abilities until they reach the 3rd level. And that I'm not a fan of. Again, I get the idea of kind of a feat version of soft multiclassing. They actually did that in in 4th edition, there was actually 2 different ways you could multi-class. You could create what was called a hybrid class, which basically meant as you leveled up, you can choose your options from either, like your powers, from either of the classes. And you can create these really interesting, unique characters. Or you could take a multi-classing feat, which would give you an ability from another class, and then give you access to a limited number of their class feats. So I can get the idea of this is supposed to be kind of like a soft multi-class, but unlike Eldritch Adept, unlike Martial, whatever, the one that gives you maneuvers from the Battlemaster fighter. This is not a limited version at all. You get the same number of sorcery points that a sorcerer gets at the 2nd level, but you get the metamagic options. Technically, you could get the metamagic options 2 levels early if you're a human variant or you use the customized race, because you get a free feat at level 1 to do that with. So by that alone, this takes away a lot of the uniqueness of the sorcerer in the fact that anyone can use it. Now, as you gain levels, the sorcerer is going to be, because they keep getting more sorcery points and you're stuck to 2 ever, the sorcerer is going to be able to use their metamagic significantly more often. And it's going to be a much more defining thing for this as a sorcerer than it is for someone that's just taken Metamagic Adept. But still, I'm not a huge fan of taking defining features of the classes and giving them to others without some sort of significant limitation. Because the other the thing, when sorcerers get metamagic at the 3rd level, you gain 2 metamagic options. So you even get the same number of choices as a sorcerer. For me, I would at least want them to limit it to, okay, you only get 1 metamagic option instead of 2. And I would almost go as far as to get rid of the 2nd half that lets you change the metamagic option as you gain levels. I know I talk about all the time, I like the ability to kind of self-correct into the things like that. However, with how much this kind of takes away something special from the sorcerer, I think it should be something that's very permanent. Yeah. So again, if I was to allow Metamagic Adept in one of my games, the player would have to have a really, really good story-based reason as to how they got access to this innate ability to modify their spells as they cast them, even though it is a significantly, you only get 2 sorcery points versus 10th level sorcerer has to 10. I don't think that's limiting it enough for low level parties. And again, it's remarkably rare for campaigns to get into tier 3, which is level 11. Most people play between the levels of about 3 and about 8 or 9. That's when most people play. Sometimes they get up to 10 or 11, but it's exceedingly rare. The sweet spot for D&D is tier 2. And the first part of tier 2, 5th and 6th level, this really isn't that much worse than a full-blown sorcerer. And again, you're getting a 3rd level of ability as a feat. So, yeah, not particularly fond of that. So, anyway, final thoughts for the ones we did. We got through 5. I'm super happy about that. So, going all the way back, again, Eldritch Adept. I like the fact that you're limited to ones without prereqs. So, it is a limited version of Eldritch invocations. I'm still not particularly fond of it because it's taking a defining feature and giving it to any Kika class. But I understand the kind of soft multi-classing feat version that this is trying to emulate. I don't think it was done particularly well. I would almost want them to create an entire entire subclass of feats for multi-classing that would be limited even more in the idea that you could only something like you can only take one multi-classing for the feat, and then any other multi-classing you have to actually multi-class. But that's just me. Fey Touched is super cool. I love Misty Step. There are a lot of super awesome divination and enchantment spells you can get it for first level that can be super duper useful. And you can cast these spells using regular spell slots if you have them. So yeah, super useful that they're there. Fighting Initiates, always cool. Give everyone fighting styles. I don't really mean that, but I think it's super cool and it can create really interesting, unique characters. Gunner is completely useless except when it isn't. When it's and when it isn't completely useless, it is absolutely essential. So yeah, it's a great feat. It's just it is only useful in situations where firearms are a thing in your campaign, and there are a lot of campaigns where firearms don't exist. So yeah, like it. It's just limited. And then Metamagic Adept, I don't like. I think it's too powerful. I think they should have reined it in. Maybe given you limited metamagic options that you could choose from, like they did with Eldritch Adept, or something else to give it. Maybe give it another prereq, like you have to be, at least level 8 or something to take it, so that first level characters can't take it and then make sorcerers feel like they chose the wrong class or chose the wrong race. So yeah. Anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on so you never miss any of my videos. In the comments below, I'm actually interested to hear what you guys think about these kind of soft multi-classing feats. Metamagic Adept and Eldritch Adept. Do you like them? Do you think it kind of ruins the point of multi-classing, or it kind of makes the classes feel less special, kind of like I did do? Or do you think there should be more feats? There should be a multi-class feat, a soft multi-class feat for every class? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right, bye-bye.